The pastors confronted me and they said, "So who are you? Who are you really?" And I said, "Well, I'm a man who used to be a woman." And their response to me was, "Okay, we love you. We love you. We just can't have you coming back here." I was probably about 3 in there, and it was a summer day, and I grew up in a tiny house with a big yard, and I was running around without my shirt on because by then I knew I already wanted to be a boy, so I was already acting out. My shoe had come untied, and so I went up to my mom and I asked her, "Will you please tie my shoe?" And she's like, "I won't until you put your shirt on." And I'm like, okay, so I just took my shoes off and ran around because I didn't want to put my shirt on because then that would make me a girl. I didn't realize that then. It was after later that I figured out that that's what I was doing. The second memory is before kindergarten, so I was about 4 or 5. I was riding my tricycle. We had a driveway, and I'd ride it up and down the driveway, and I had its own little parking spot like you would for your car. And I can remember riding my tricycle up and down the driveway and pulling into different places on the driveway, like pretending I was going to pick up my girlfriend and we were going to go get married. And it was at that point that I began to realize that this probably isn't normal. When I think back about the memories, I don't really have any feelings attached to them. A lot of my childhood, there's not a lot of feelings attached to things unless they're really traumatic and painful. And there's been healing in those. However, I was just so detached emotionally that I didn't know how to feel about certain things that happened. I viewed my dad, he emotionally was abusive to my mom as well as verbally. I did see my dad hit my mom. It was only like twice. I know that's twice too many, but as far as, physical abuse, there wasn't really anything. My dad was a very jealous man, very insecure. I realize now he's very narcissistic, so it was pretty much all about him. But in the verbal abuse and in the emotional abuse, I watched my mom crumble underneath that. And the way my dad did these things, my little mind came to the conclusions that women are hated, women are vulnerable, and women are weak. And that's why he was picking on my mom, basically. And then when I watched my mom respond out of these things, I saw that she was weak because she didn't know how to stand up for herself. She didn't know how to draw those boundaries because she was afraid of him. He could be angry in a moment. And I watched her be vulnerable in that as he continued to charge at her with words and those types of abuses. And she acted like she was hated. And so when I looked at all of that, I'm like, okay, so I'm like my mom, and my dad's this way and my mom's that way, and I don't want to be hated. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be vulnerable. So what else do I have but to become a man? When I was 7, my little brother was born, and he was celebrated tremendously. And whatever affection I had from my dad was now all turned to my little brother. So there was another lie that crept in there that I could be replaced. Boys are celebrated, women are replaced. And so that really affirmed, in order to get that affection, I had to be a boy, to be affirmed, to be okay, to be celebrated, to be good enough, or just to be enough. When I was 11, I have an older half-brother, and he began to molest me. And even though I felt that it was wrong, I had that lie in there, women are weak and women are vulnerable. So he was taking advantage of me, believing I was weak and vulnerable, not knowing how to stand up to him, and also knowing that if I told my dad would probably beat the living stuff out of him. My mom would probably deny it, as she did with anything else when confronted. She would be like, "No, your dad's okay. The way he's treating me is okay." And so I grew up in this really unhealthy atmosphere. I was probably molested by my older brother until I was like 13. And I don't know why he stopped. I was just glad that he did. And I don't know if I got to a certain age where I was no longer appealing to him or what. But those are the things that the Lord has shown me that, stirred all in there. And then those lies were affirmed along the way too, as far as when my parents had a rental house, and one of the families that moved in there, I can remember the woman. So my mom would always make friends with the wife that was, of the couple. And I can remember her saying to my mom, she would be such a cute little boy. I was like, yeah. So that totally affirmed, all those things that, yeah, it would be better to be a boy. People are recognizing that I'm already cute as a boy, so I might as well be that. And being a woman isn't really a great option. Just was not a great option.
Denise Schick, the founder and executive director of Help for Families, has written Transgender Confusion, a biblical-based Q&A for families. In this book, Schick explores a variety of topics including science and feelings, family questions and answers, answering theological questions, walking in truth, and Christianity and culture. This is an invaluable resource for families with transgender confusion in their midst. To get your copy of Transgender Confusion, go to www.helpforfamilies.com. David Kyle Foster describes from Scripture the sanctification process in his book, Transformed into His Image, Hidden Steps on the Journey to Christ-likeness, borrowing key insights from leaders like Leanne Payne, Larry Crabb, and Benedict Rochelle. This book calls the Christian deeper into the life that God created us to have and shows God's provision for making it possible. Download your copy of Transformed into His Image today, wherever ebooks are sold, or get the paperback version at our online store at www.purepassion.us.
When I was 16, I got a car, and I had met a girl at one of those dances I was at. And so she became my girlfriend, and I would go out and pick her up, and we'd go out on dates. And I was totally lying to my parents where I was going. Eventually, that caught up with me because this mom was kind of putting it together, and she called my parents, and then my parents confronted me. That was when I told them I wanted to be a man. And my dad pretty much told me, we will not talk about this again. You are not going to do that. And at one point I was alone with my mom, and I said to my mom, Mom, you know what? I really do want to be a boy. And my mom said, that's gross. And I was like, all right, so my secret will continue. Even though the girl knew about me, she still viewed me as her boyfriend. So we kind of went off and on there for a little while. And then when I became 19, I got out of the house. I started doing my research to find out who would help me. I went to a doctor, and he's like, yeah, I can start you on hormones. So I moved out of the house, and I began the hormones, and I thought I was free. I was like, yeah, I'm finally here. I have arrived. I am free. This is my life. I saw myself as a heterosexual male, and to date women as a male was normal. I never viewed myself really as a woman per se, other than that was the part that I hated. That was the part that I was constantly pushing down and being detached from, as far as any identity, sexual identity as a woman or gender or anything. I totally wanted to be male. One of the things that the Lord revealed was that because my mom wasn't nurturing, there was this nurture thing that I was missing. And I believe that's why I thought wanting to be with women was normal, because a lot of the women that I would choose would be very nurturing, very gentle, very soft, ones that needed to be protected. Because one of the vows that I made is that I'm going to be the man my dad is not. I'm not going to be an abuser. I'm not going to be those things that he is. So I took the hormones. Of course, right away, I started filling out muscularly. I started getting acne and started to grow a beard. And I think so I started at the age of 19. And I think from 19 forward, I don't think I was ever without a mustache once I was able to grow one. It was part of my identity. And then I continued to work out on top of that. So I got pretty buffed and then taking the hormones. And then I was taking an extra little bit more to make sure that I could keep up this physique when I worked out. Because my goal was not to ever be known as a woman. My goal was to only be known as a man. And I couldn't figure out, because I had met some other transsexual people, And they were all about being known. And I'm like, no, I don't want to sit around a group and talk about being a transgender person. I just want to go and live a normal life. This life as a man, normally. That was my whole goal. And so in continuing to work out, I realized later that that was my form of protection. The harder I worked out, the less weak I felt. I felt, there's a whole safety issue in that. As I viewed my mom, I'm like, you were never very safe. And so I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be tough so that no one can take advantage of me. I won't be weak, and I can protect the women that need protection. I was very cautious when I dressed and undressed. I usually tried to go to the gym already in my gym clothes. And if not, then I would use a stall. I would change that way. Or if I knew there was a place where nobody really used the locker room right there, I would change there. And I would do it as quickly as I could. In wearing man's clothing, that just affirmed who I was. It was my outer appearance that affirmed what I felt in my heart. And there was no sexual experience no gratification or any things like that. That was just to keep my identity safe. I did think of operations. In fact, I did have a mastectomy. But as far as below that, it was very expensive at that time. I went as far as going through the interviews for it and to see if I was a good candidate, and I was, but then again, it was the money, and financially, I was just not in a place to continue that. So my spiritual journey, I was raised Lutheran, so at that point, if I can put it this way, it felt very dead. There was a point in my life where I was a God stalker. I knew everything about God, but I didn't know him. And then in high school, there was a Christian movement that I got involved in, and I accepted the Lord, but I don't know if I was for real in that when I was in high school. It was a very emotional experience, but nothing heart-changing in that. And it was interesting because I accepted him when I was living that double life in high school. And then when I moved out and began to live as a man, I lived with a Chinese family, and she had 2 daughters. One was 14 and one was 12, and I went to their youth group. And it was in going to that church that I asked the Lord to be my savior. And the next morning when I woke up, I'm like, oh, well, you didn't strike me dead. You must be okay with the way I'm living. But there was something inside of me that thought I didn't do it right. So the next service, I went down again, accepted the Lord, and nothing really seemed different. And so then I went down the 3rd time and accepted the Lord. And I'm like, well, this must be good because, I'm not dead. He hasn't, I didn't feel any conviction as far as how I was living. So I continued on to pursue the Lord. There was a church who heard about me. My dad had found out where I was working, and he went in and talked to my employer and said, this guy's not a guy. It's actually my daughter, and da-da-da-da. Well, as he's explaining this to my employer, a person that I went to church with also worked there, and she heard the entire thing, took it to the pastors. The pastors confronted me, and they said, so who are you? Who are you really? And I said, well, I'm a man who used to be a woman. And their response to me was, okay, we love you. We love you. We just can't have you coming back here. So I left that church. Somehow, though, I knew that wasn't the heart of God, and I hadn't lost hope. I guess I expected their response. There was kind of this expectation that I wouldn't be welcomed. And I don't know if that came because I knew my parents wouldn't be accepting of that. I always anticipated rejection, so I'd always be prepared. After that happened, I learned how to look 2 steps, or actually 4 steps forward to make sure all my bases were covered, and 2 steps back to make sure nothing was revealed back there. So I got really good at being deceptive. And I didn't think of it as being deceptive. I thought more as being protective and making sure that my life was safe. Because, I had seen a couple of movies where transgender people had gotten beaten up, and one of them got killed. And I was like, so that made me even more intentional as far as keeping myself together and not letting anybody know and not ever being caught. And, it's amazing, though, because I do see little points of the Lord in there working on my behalf. I was at a bar, and I'd been drinking, and, when you drink, eventually you have to go use the facilities. And I can remember going into the bathroom the first time, and all there was the urinal and the stall had no door. And I'm like, oh man, this is not a good situation for me. But I couldn't use the women's because I look like this beefy guy now. So I'm like, all right, I need some help here. And so I went in there and nobody was in the bathroom. I mean, this was a very busy bar. So I went in, used the bathroom, and I had just walked out of the stall and 3 guys walked in. And so in my mind, I'm like, thank you, Lord. You know, there's little pockets like that where I felt like I got protection from the Lord, because I don't know how else that happened. I don't believe in coincidences. And I know that there was times where he, you know, took care of me. I'm not saying that he agreed with my life, but I think as a parent, you know, all parents, even if you don't agree with your child, there's a certain amount of protective thing that you have inside you that you want to help them through that rough time. After I got kicked out of the church, I continued and I found a new job. And in that job, I met another girl. We got together because, you know, we just spent so much time and we were talking. And I think there was a certain amount of attraction to begin with. She was a Christian, and I can remember coming over to her house and she always had her Bible open. And so I asked her, I said, how much do you read the Bible? And she said to me, as much as I can. And I thought, what? What is that? Who wants to read their Bible as much as they can? And I thought, maybe I should be doing that. So we were together probably for about 3 years. And probably in the first 6 months, I confided in her. I'm like, hey, I know this is what you see, but this is what you're getting. And she was like, that's okay. I'm okay with that. So we were together for 3 years, and I went to the church with her that she was going to, and I really liked it. So I was continuing to pursue the Lord, or what I thought was pursuing the Lord, but I think it was just still God stalking, trying to figure out, who is this God and what does he mean? And when this happens, what happens here? And, you know, I hear this in the Bible. What does that mean? So there was a bunch of questions that I had. And then when her and I broke up, I stayed at that church. At that time, the Lord brought along some spiritual parents, a mom and dad. The spiritual father, I didn't know this at the time, but he was actually bringing healing as far as just being a dad and just loving on me. Though I know I was deceiving him in it, he was somebody that I could call and say, hey, I'm wondering this about the Lord. What does that mean? So I was able to begin to ask questions about that. And after I broke up with her, I immediately got into another relationship with a woman. I was on the rebound. And after about a year of dating her, we were fighting a lot. And I woke up one morning and I realized, oh my gosh, she's my mom and I'm my dad. And I'm like, I'm abusing her just like my dad did. Maybe not to the same degree, but it was close enough to realize I can't be doing this to her. I have become everything that I vowed I would not be. So we broke up. And in doing so, I got more involved in the church and become even more hungry for the Lord. I began to be involved in the junior high ministry. I love junior high kids. That hasn't changed. Whether I lived as a man or now, as who God created me to be, I still love junior high kids. So I think there's something wired in there for them. And then I was leading a men's small group. I was also in the orchestra. And then I was part of kind of a leadership for college-age kids. And then I was also part of the older single adults. And that's where the men's Bible study was with that group. So I was involved with a lot. I was known pretty much a lot in the church. As I continued, I did meet this girl that I was like, wow, I really like you. I was really falling hard for her. I hadn't told her anything yet. And I got her involved in the junior high ministry. There was a retreat. It was a winter retreat. And she was a skier, so I invited her, and she helped out in the kitchen. It was at that retreat that I realized, you know what? I think I love this girl. I really love this girl. And we came back from the retreat, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and we had time enough to go to evening church. I was dead tired. I didn't want to go, but she wanted to, so I went. My spiritual dad came up to me, and he said, hey, do you got a moment? Can I talk to you about something? And I thought, you know what? I know this feeling of, can I talk to you about something? And I thought, I think I'm going to be confronted. We went back into this prayer room, and one of the pastors that we'd become friends. He was pastor of the college age group. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. He's sitting there waiting for me. My spiritual dad brings me back here. I'm just like, all right, here we go. I'm going to be confronted. Sure enough. And the pastor looked at me and he said, I just got a question for you. Well, he said, we're hearing some rumors about you. And I just want to know, who are you? Who are you really? Same question, 11 years earlier. And I'm like, oh, wow. But this time, for whatever reason, I told the truth. And I said, prior to that, I'd said, I'm a man who used to be a woman. This time I said, I'm a woman living as a man. That's the truth. And when I did that, the Holy Spirit went and just blew into me. And I was like, ooh. And, I didn't know much about the prophetic or anything, but I had this quick vision and I saw 2 weeks of my life and everything I needed to do. And I needed to step down from this ministry. And first and foremost, though, I had to go back to being who God created me to be. And I was like, ugh. To me, there was no other option. I had no other choice. There was no plan B. There was not, maybe I could live as a eunuch. Maybe I could, not date. There was just, those options were not there. That was plan A.
This is a time when we all need the advice and help we can get to minister not only to those with homosexual confusion, but to the transgendered person as well. Denise Schick grew up with a father who was transgendered. The lessons she learned in that crucible have informed more than a decade of ministry, as well as a new book called Understanding Gender Confusion, a faith-based perspective. In this book, Denise shares great wisdom on subjects ranging from cross-dressing to sex change regret. To get your copy of Understanding Gender Confusion, go to www.helpforfamilies.com. Restored Hope Network is a coalition of ministries serving those who desire to overcome sinful relational and sexual issues in their lives, and those impacted by such behavior, particularly homosexuality. RHN connects those seeking help with local member ministries and other resources. Even as the culture embraces distorted expressions of gender, sexuality, and relationships, RHN affirms God's unchanging hope and truth that Jesus Christ transforms the lives of all who seek Him. Visit restoredhopenetwork.org.
That's one of the questions I've had from the Lord is, Lord, how did you do that? Because I was dead set. I mean, everything about my life said I'm a man. How did you change my thinking? How did you do that? Because when he blew into me, I was like, oh yeah, I got to do this. I have to go do this. And I'm thinking, I got to step down from this ministry. I got to step down from this ministry. I got to step down from this ministry. Oh, and I got to go out and break up with my girlfriend. And as I look back on that, I'm like, why would I love this girl. I'm thinking she's the one, I'm going to marry her, and I'm like, yeah, I got to go and break up with this girl. Like it was just matter of a fact. And when I asked the pastor, I said, so what do you think I should do? I hadn't shared anything with him that had just happened. He's like, I don't know. I don't know. I've never dealt with this. And I said, well, I think I know. And he's like, okay, great. What should we do? And I said, well, I believe I need to go back to living as a woman. And he's like, okay, all right. And I said, and I feel like this plan has been laid out. And so I need to go and I need to step down from this. And I need to go and talk to the pastor over the worship or over the orchestra. And I need to, do this and I need to do this. And I was working with him and I said, and I need to step down from what I'm doing with you. And oh, I need to go and break up with my girlfriend. He's like, all right, let's do this. And he said, how about we meet for the next 2 weeks and let's get everything in motion. I'll set up the meetings with the pastors that you need to talk to and we'll do this. And I thought that was interesting that he said the next 2 weeks because that's what the Lord had showed me. And I never told him that. I just told him, I think this is the things that I need to do this, need to do this. And I never said it was over a 2-week period, but he goes, okay, in the next couple of weeks, let's put this in motion and let's get you moving forward. And I was like, all right, I'm in. I don't know how that happened. I just knew. And I think because the Lord, when I broke up with that girl that I realized was my mom, there was probably a couple of years in there. And I can remember I was driving to orchestra practice, and I'm driving along, and the Lord said to me, will you now? Will you now? And he wasn't angry, but he was intentional with his question. So I'm taking this inventory. I don't got a girlfriend, kind of do. I want more church. I want to know the Lord. I'm thinking, I ain't got no reason not to. And I'm like, yes, Lord, I will. And, and at that point when I was dating the woman that was like my mom, I had gotten steeped in addiction to pornography. I was like, I couldn't go a day without seeing it. And it was a bad addiction. And I would try to talk about it, but there would just be so much shame. And I would say, yeah, you know what? I watched pornography today. And they're like, oh, yeah, wow, that's a bummer. And, but they didn't understand that I watched the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. And I already had plans to watch it tomorrow. So it was bad. And when I said yes to the Lord, it was about 3 months later that I realized, hey, wait, I haven't watched pornography and I haven't wanted to. So when I said yes to the Lord, yes, Lord, I will, he broke that. And I didn't know he had broken that. I mean, there was no, thunder and lightning, and I didn't feel any different. I just drove on to orchestra practice and, and then I was freed from that. From that point, there was probably maybe a 4-year period where the Lord continued to just woo me, bringing healing. And it just so happened that the pastor at the church, different pastor, head pastor, did a teaching on dad, the Lord being our dad. What does that look like as the Lord being our dad? Not just being father, but being our dad. And I can remember just, wanting to lay down and cry like a baby during those services because of what I understood the Lord's heart for me, or what I thought I could understand, because it was just so much and so overwhelming. And he was touching this really deep place of pain with my dad. And then having my spiritual dad come along and affirm that, yeah, God does feel this way about you. He does say these things about you. And so here I have my spiritual dad and God, both of them kind of wooing me to the Lord, and he just continued to woo me. And I was just so hungry for him. And I can remember I started reading my Bible every day, thinking, man, I get why she wanted to read her Bible. There's good stuff in here. And I can remember being so happy about my Bible, I would carry it into work, and I'd have it on my desk. And people are like, man, what's wrong with you? You're carrying this Bible thing. And I'm like, yeah, I love it. Let me tell you about what I read.